Hey ho, let's go. Welcome back to Horror Talks Live. After reading Stephen King's Pet Sematary, a novel that falls under the genre horror, we see a family, the Creeds, moving into their brand new home in Maine. They're all excited, they're happy, they're joyous, and all that great stuff. They then meet an amiable neighbor, Judd Crandall, who warns them of the deadly road in front of their house, a sign of things to come. Tragedies unfold and dark secrets are revealed as the story goes on. Later in the story, Lewis, the patriarch of the family, is alone at the house as the rest of the family is away in Chicago visiting their grandparents. Shortly thereafter, Church, the family cat, gets killed on the road by a semi. Not good. Lewis, of course, finds himself in a state of panic, grief, as he didn't want his daughter Ellie finding out about the death of her cat. So Judd reveals to Lewis about the dark magic of the Micmac burial um, site and its ability to bring back the dead. But he also warned him about the ramifications, as does a ghost of one of Lewis's dead patients, Victor Pascal. Well, Lewis didn't care about any of those admonitions or warnings or whatnot. He just was concerned about making the situation right. So he buried the cat at the site, came home, only to find out a few days later that the cat had returned as a malevolent creature, not the same as he was. Now, the story's characters are so well written that they seemed like real people. They really do. The writing has good flow, and the descriptions of the haunted imagery of the Pet Cemetery, the Micmac Indian burial ground, and the memories of Rachel's horrifying sister, Zelda, worked out very well. And not to mention Gage coming back from the dead as a dark, twisted version of himself, and which made you ponder that, well, what would really happen if the dead did come back from the afterlife? Would they be the same? So I found that to be a very, very thought-provoking moment, but it also sent a chill down my spine. Okay. Now, above all, I was really impressed with Victor Pasco's spirit warning Lewis about the dangers of the Micmac Indian burial ground. Now, seeing ghosts coming back from the living isn't uncommon in literature, as we see it take place in the classic A Christmas Carol, by Charles Dickens, where we see Scrooge um, being warned by Jacob Marley that he'll be visited by three ghosts to give him a chance to avoid the same fate of eternal punishment as Marley. Then we see the same thing or something similar happen in American Werewolf in London, where Jack warns David that if he doesn't kill himself, he will kill others. So the whole omen concept of um, Victor Pasco returning from the dead and sharing his admonitions, as well as the reoccurring motif, "Hey ho, let's go," worked out well in the book. I'll say that. Now, the eerie dialogue of the characters, especially the conversations between Lewis and Crandall, helped build suspense surrounding the mystery of the Micmac Indian burial ground, as well as the intermittent trucks zooming past the house and the resurrected cat. Helped maintain my captivation as a reader, and not to mention the literature referencing Cujo and The Shining, which indicates that all of this is occurring within the same universe. I mean, how awesome is that? So basically, you have the Marvel universe, you have the DC universe, and you have the Stephen King universe. Interesting, isn't it? Well, it's all good, and it all worked out well. Okay, and now while going through the book, the characters had a way of growing on me. They really did, especially Judd Crandall. He seemed like a well, the way the storyteller depicted him, he seemed like a grandfatherly figure who showed caring compassion toward the Creed family, and And while listening to him speak just opened your mind, but you became even more in tune with him when it came to him warning about the horrors of the burial ground. Okay, so Crandall was someone you didn't want to see taken out of the plot. You wanted him to stay there. Because of who he is. Naturally, you couldn't help feel sorry for Gage, who got killed by a semi on the road. And there was outpour of emotion with the characters. Rachel, struggling with her past demons, especially with her dead sister Zelda, as well as her daughter Ellie, carrying around a picture of Gage in the scene after his death. Okay. So I think those elements were very important in character development. Now moving on, Pet Cemetery touches upon such themes as mortality, death, resurrection, psychological trauma, and guilt. Okay. Um, One aspect I found most captivating, however, is the Wendigo monster lurking around the Micmac burial ground. The manner in which Crandall spoke about him aroused the mystery and suspense in the story, and even making Lewis feel somewhat apprehensive. Okay. Now, the legend of the monster implies that he plays a role in the resurrection of any creature that is buried at the site. Okay. And thus, it gives hope to the bereaved that they will see their loved ones once again, despite its horrifying nature. Okay. Now, those were all the good things about the book that I had picked up on. Um, to my dismay, however, I discovered a few flaws in the story. And I'll start with Lewis. He's presented as a medical doctor, a very intelligent man. And when he arrives in that new home, the first thing he notices and gets warned about is the danger of the road, and how it poses, and how it acts as a threat to his family. Shouldn't it have been his first impulse to construct a wall or a fence surrounding the perimeter of the front lawn so as to protect his children from the highway? Why didn't he do that? Could it be that he hated being married? He hated responsibility. As a reader, I couldn't help but hate Lewis um, for destroying his family. And he's a character to despise, not to admire or look up on. All right. So that's my take on him. Another blemish I notice is at the end of chapter 33, part one, we see Lewis watching Gage in his crib. Fair enough. Then, when part two begins, um, there seems to be a time jump, okay, where we're reading a passage about Gage's death or his funeral and the emotion following it, okay? The sudden switch of events didn't quite gel with me, unfortunately, because it was too quick. It was too unexpected for my mind to register, okay? The third flaw um, is the title of the book itself, Pet Sematary. While reading the tome, I learned that the Pet Cemetery and the Micmac Indian Burial Ground are two different locations. The Pet Cemetery does not raise pets from the dead. It has nothing to do with resurrecting anything. Um, it's just, it just has a misspelled sign placed there by the local children who buried their dead parakeets and their dogs there. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, if you want to stretch it by giving it some significance or credence, you could say, well, in order to access the Micmac Indian burial ground, you must first walk through the Pet Cemetery. Okay. So therefore, it acts as a mere reference point in this whole story of Pet Sematary. Nothing more, nothing less. But the central focal point is on the Micmac Indian burial ground, okay? And it's dark magic that brings back dead animals, to life. And so that's basically what I had picked up on. And with that being said, the name of the book should have been associated with the Micmac Indian burial ground. And of course, that's just my opinion. Okay. And once again, it barely has anything to do with the Pet Cemetery. Okay. Again, Pet Cemetery has no magic, nothing. Okay. Last but not least, Crandall blames himself for the death of Gage, which I find preposterous. Okay. He explicitly tells Lewis that he feels responsible for Gage's death because he introduced Lewis to the power of the Indian burial ground. Okay. In other words, the entity behind the burial ground has a way of manipulating people into using it so that it in turn becomes more powerful. And Crandall gets used in this instance. Okay. Now, in reality, um, people are are inherently born with a free will, okay, to thwart evil or to embrace evil, okay. Hence, in the Gospels, and I got a copy of the Bible right here. Um, there's an entity called Satan who roams the earth to and fro in search of souls to devour, okay. And of course, even the Quran acknowledges one called Iblis, okay, who influences people to commit evil acts. And lastly, you have the book of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, all right, and which describes something called the Lord of Death, okay, and this pantheon of dark evil spirits, which are nothing but projections of the human subconscious, okay. So Crandall, blaming himself, I don't believe was the cause of his mind being influenced by the entity in the burial ground, because that gets into perceptual manipulation. I don't buy it. I think Crandall had this empathy, this strong empathy for Lewis, where he took it upon himself to act as a scapegoat. Okay. And because his inner fear was Lewis having suicidal thoughts for feeling guilty of not watching his son. Okay, because had he watched his son, then Gage wouldn't have gotten killed. So that's my take on that. And but overall, you know, Pet Cemetery is a literary masterpiece. You know, that's shrouded in mystery, suspense, and horror. It takes the human imagination to a whole new level where the reader sees the unknown through a different lens. And King pulled it off. He pulled it off quite well. So, on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, I give it 4. Okay. And that's my um, review of Stephen King's epic novel, Pet Sematary. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time on Horror Talks Live.